Okay, Gene, so I was asked to do a presentation. I prepared the presentation called What Imitates What? And then I got a phone call from the president. He said, you will be tying some flies, won't you? And I said, no. He said, I know, you're going to tie some flies as well. So I thought, right. So reorganised the presentation in order to inject a fly or two into the presentation. Now, how many of you don't tie flies at all? Oh, good. Okay, well this is aimed at you, because I'm going to convince you how easy it is to tie your own flies, and how inexpensive it is too to tie your own flies. That's good. That's good. How many of you tie your own flies, but you're just unsure what you're tying? Yeah, I was one of those for many years. I'd just tie a thing, and I wouldn't really know what it was supposed to do. Now, I'm going to include here what flies you need to learn to tie first as a priority. Okay? So tonight the session is twofold. Which fly is which is a mystery to many, and it still remains a mystery for some. It really does, and it did for me for years, I have to say. It took me a while to work out the differences between, for example, a caddis and a sedge. I thought, gee, you read about cinnamon sedges, and then you read about caddises, that sort of thing. And then, of course, the penny drop, it's the same damn beast, same animal. It's just the Pongs refer to them as a sedge, and the Americans and the Australians, of course, so we call them a caddis. So a sedge is a caddis, in case you're wondering. Okay. If you don't tie your own, and you should, we'll tie a couple of simple ones as we go, just to show you how easy it is to tie your own. Okay? And I believe if you can tie your own shoelaces, you should be able to tie your own flies. It's as easy as that, to be frank. There's a couple of the flies here we'll tie tonight. They're that easy, they're almost insultingly easy to tie. Now, just a note here. When you're fly tying, I think most of us aren't into tying exact imitations. You know, there are those that they're after a thing to put up on the wall in a frame that looks exact. It looks exact. And then you've got others who, they just, all we need to do is get the shape right, the size right, the colour right. And even then, if your casting is no good, you will have a challenge on your hands. So at the end of the day, the casting has to be good, but yes, the fly, shape, the size, the colour, and generally that's what you go by. It doesn't have to be an exact imitation at all. As we'll see here, the flies that they use in competitions, for example, most of them are, oh, it could be this, could be that, it could be anything really, but the fish aren't sure, but if it's presented right, it'll be taken. Okay, so we're not here into tying exact imitation. So attractors and lures, don't imitate anything in particular, like a royal wolf, for example, woolly buggers, stiff stimulators, red tags, carrots. All of these are just a general attractor. And please note the spelling of wolf. We have to fix this, because people, they call them wolves, as in woof woof. The inventor of the fly was Lee Wolf, and of course his wife also is a brilliant caster, I have to say. I saw her one night casting a fly rod in an RSL club, and she had all the line out, and then she started to break the rod off, and then she's casting with the tip only, and then she removed the tip, and she's casting with her arm only, with half the line out. It was just amazing. So the spelling is wolf. I'm glad we fixed that. Now tonight, over the next for 5 or 6 hours. I'll try to make it as abridged. I'll try to make it as abridged as I can. I'm going to work through the typical food groups, and of course the salties in the room are going to say, "Gee, there's not much here in the way of salt water." Well, really, there's bait fish, there's prawns, there's crabs and squid, and there's not much more really in the salt. Well, of course, lots of variations of these things, but the reason why the freshwater area is a bit more complex is because trout are insect eaters, and we need to have a look at the insects that they eat. They're insectivorous, I suppose is the word. So we'll start with mayflies. So note here, we have the eggs are laid, and then the nymph can spend year and a half, a year underwater. Okay, whole year goes on under the surface here, brown nymphs. Okay, and then one day during the year, when the conditions are right, the nymph comes up to the surface. The drawing here is it's missing the emerger, so we have a floating nymph, and then we have the dun that crawls out of the back of the nymph, and the dun is actually a teenager. The dun flies up to a branch on a tree to dry out its wings. Invariably, for example, on Penstock, they're sailing around in little boats as they dry out their wings. And if it's a very humid day, it takes them ages to dry out their wings if it's foggy and what have you. And that's when the trout are everywhere. I mean, I've had a red letter day once where you're able to pick your fish. That was rising all over the place on Penstock. But I've been there when there's no duns at all. Last time I was there, we were lucky to find a dun. So the dun, the teenager, turns into an adult. And guess what? They hang around only for a day. It's why the Latin is ephemera, because they're very ephemeral. They only last for a day. And I remember you've probably heard of the mayfly goes into the doctor who happens to be a grasshopper. And the grasshopper says, "Well, we've got the good news and the bad news. The good news is you don't have your cancer at all." The mayfly says, "Oh, that's good. But the bad news is you're a mayfly." So essentially they have a day to live. They mate in the air, lay their eggs on the water. They generally adjust themselves on streams, incidentally. They fly upstream to allow the eggs to drift back to where they usually originally emerged. And then we end up with a spinner with wings out flat on the water. So the question is, of the stages here, bearing in mind we're only above the water for a day or two, and we're below the water for a year, it makes a lot of sense statistically to use nymphs. Particularly if there's nothing happening on the surface. Okay? It makes a lot of sense. And you're able to see here some real pics. There's a Penstock nymph. You see the fingerprints there. Just hold up your thumb, John. That's a match for John Maccaro's thumb. Okay? And clearly the dun has crawled its way out of the back of the nymph. And there's a dun. You can see the wings are fairly dull. Proportions already if you're tying flies. Note the wing is a body length, the tail is a body length, so it's a body length for the tail and the wing. And then there's the spinner, and you can see the colour is different. It's orange. The tail is very long. It's almost 3 body lengths. So there's the cycle for mayflies. And of course the message is if you're not there on a red hot day and the duns are hatching, well, it's nymph time. So mayfly nymph, here's a photo I took on the Gungahlin. No, 1 wing case, 3 tails. And that's most mayflies have 1 wing case and the 3 tails. And the closest copy is probably a pheasant tail nymph, 1 wing case. You know, it's a third, 2/3, in proportions, and probably a great imitation is a heron copper. There's one with a bead, there's one with no bead. And you probably don't know this, but the hare and copper is actually New Zealand's most popular nymph. And these are variations of it around the different regions of New Zealand. They have preferences in the way it looks, but it's the same fly. It's the same fly. We have a number of different emergers, and this is the nymph that's hanging in the meniscus. And the classic that we use in Tasmania, of course, is the possum emerger. Very hard to see because it lays low. There's a cripple. And here's, if you like, your floating nymph, or the pre-emergent nymph, as they call them. That's just a foam ball that's tied on the front of the nymph. And these are imitations of your Penstock dun. There's one here which is interesting. Wings. There used to be an Australian tie by the name of Fadge Griffiths, and his firm view was that the only purpose of wings is to allow the angler to see the fly, that wings are superfluous.
He was colourblind.
And he never used to tie wings on the flies. It's not what the fish sees, it's what the angler sees. So it's interesting here. Here's one here. It's just got a dubbing ball with a parachute hackle around it as an imitation of a dun. There's the spinner. You see through the length of the tail. It's just amazing. A couple of imitations. There's your classic. No, the tails really have to splay out well. We use micro fibbits. This one here's a bit of a cheat all the way from Bunnings. That's a paintbrush bristle. And we bring it up and we loop it over as well, all the one piece, to form the shape of a wing. So there's, but as I say, really spent spinners are the way to go. They're the ones that the fish are mopping up around the place. So if you're going to be tying a spinner, it would be of the spent variety, I would suggest. In Tassie as well, not only do we have orange spinners, we have black spinners. And here's one on the fly rod near Lake K in Tassie, and there's a typical imitation of a black spinner. And you notice the colour is different altogether there. But you've got to have these outrigger tails to get the thing to sit nice and flat on the water. There's a cosy spinner. I took that one night up on the Gungahlin while we were camping. So if you look at the differences between a mayfly nymph and a stonefly nymph, we'll do the stoneflies in a moment. 2 wing cases, 2 tails, 1 wing case with the 3 tails. But tell me, if you were a trout and you saw that in the water, what would it be imitating? Could be anything.
Could be anything.
It could be either of them.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter at all. So we do away with the wing case altogether and we tie a heron copper. So let's do that. And I would suggest that this is the first fly you should learn to tie when you're starting out. The first one. This is the one we teach everybody on fly tying guide. You walk in the door, you're new, sit down there and tie, and we'll help you with a so here we go in there.
Just got to get my focus. Hang on.
I'll attach the thread as the hook here. Now, everybody, there is a cardinal sin in fly tying, and that is crowding the eye of the hook. And you'll notice, hopefully on the screen, you'll see there's a gap there. I've left a gap. And that gap, hopefully, is equal to the inside diameter of the eye of the hook. Now, one of the most expensive materials that you will ever use is copper wire. And it's used extensively, I have to say, in tying a lot of flies. Used for ribbing, used extensively just as a body, in fact, on some flies. So I'll grab a piece of copper wire here. This is going to be the rib.
It doesn't have to be weighted, Dave? Doesn't it any weight on it?
We could, if we wanted to, we could put a bead on the front if we wanted to, or put some lead underneath the dubbing as well. We could do that too. So a beauty of tying your own is that you can weight them accordingly. If you need to get it down, you know which ones you've weighted and which ones you haven't. So there's my rib. I'm probably not doing this in the right order, and I'm not, but it doesn't matter. Now a pheasant tail is used a lot in fly tying, but particularly the ones with the bronzy strands. So I'm going to put a tail onto this one. So that's is going to be our tail. Note, you use the hook as a gauge, and I want the tail to stick out about that far. In fact, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to advance my thread to the middle of the hook, judging that. Now note here, I'm using what's called the pinch wrap. My finger and thumb here are not made of glass, so you're unable to see through them. But what I'm doing is tying that material on top of the hook. 99.9% of the time we're trying to tie the material on top of the hook. Now you see the angle, there we call these angle wraps, as I hold it up and keep it on top of the hook. There we are there, that's good. Bring it down there, I'll remove that. So now I'll just, and you'll notice also I'm trying to keep my winding radius to a minimum, rather than doing this, cranking with my whole arm and going around like this. That's quite slow. I should be able even just to go inside the gape of the hook. So now we're going to dub. And I'm just going to use direct dubbing, where we attach the dubbing onto the thread. I'm waxing the thread here. Get your sort of sticky wax. Let's use, here's one here. Holding our thread taut, we wind the dubbing in one direction only. A bit more dubbing. A bit more dubbing there.
What dubbing are you using there?
This one is it's a mixture. I can see the seal fur in there. There may even be a bit of a rabbit as well. So we'll just apply this. A little bit more dubbing. Dubbing is just fluff. You can make your own. All you need is a blender and a pair of scissors. It blew away, did it? Well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use a different colour just to make things a bit different. Yeah, it looks like it blew away. Here we are. Walking my bobbin up the... Now I need a bit more. Should be wearing my glasses to do this. I started to tie my first flies when I was a kid, living in Cooma. I think I tied my first flies when I was in primary school. And I'm sort of heading towards 80 as we speak, so even though write-ups in the Flyrodder refer to me as the guru and the master and all that sort of stuff. That's not true at all, just that I've been at this for a very long time. And I suppose I've seen all the fads and the crazes and the changes over the years. Okay, so that will do us there. Now I'm going to rib this. And to make sure that your ribbing is even, it's best to look down if you can, more on top of the hook. So you see I'm sliding it between the fingers as I rib. Others are saying, gee, if he was using a rotary vise, he'd be able to do this a lot quicker. Probably so. Drop the bobbin over the... bobbin's a little bit loose. And as the Americans say, now we can helicopter off the copper. Helicoptered off the copper. And what I suggest is don't try to learn whip finishes at this stage if you're starting out. Just use a half hitch. Just a half hitch is fine. You can apply them with fingers only. See, I've got my fingers here, just a pinch here, I pinch there, I turn, and I drop the half hitch on. I turn, and it's on. Half hitch. Half hitch tool, turn, and it's on. One turn, you see that? And it's on. Now I'll do the equivalent now. 1, 2, look, there's 2 of them now going on. That's equivalent to a whip finish, there's no difference in the knot. So 2 turns of the whip finishing tool is exactly the same as a double half hitch. So there you have it, folks. And what I like to do with these, I suppose the shape isn't all that bad. One of the most expensive tools that you can have in your toolkit, we joke about these of course, is a paddle pop stick with some Velcro on the end. And using that, we rough up our fly a little bit. Give a little bit of an aura there. Yeah, and there we have it. So that's the first one. That's the first nymph I would suggest that you tie. A hair and copper nymph, and